to all of our educations. So thank you, Sandy, because I forget that all the time. And so this is open to all of our members, but it is specifically geared towards those audiences, just so people are aware. I will ask if everybody wouldn't mind, unless you are presenting, to go ahead and mute your microphones. If you don't, I will go ahead and mute you before we get started. But it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our special guest for this evening, Therese Antonini, who is her Sweet Adeline journey started, has been varied and adventurous. She's been a member of 8 different choruses in 5 different Canadian provinces and in one American state. And that consists of 5 different regions. At the course level, she's served in most leadership positions as the events coordinator and education facility or faculty at the regional level, and on the international task force committees and international board of directors. She's currently a member of the International Faculty Program and is also currently serving as our Sweet Adeline International President. So we're really great to have her here. She especially loves her role as panel secretary, and has a very special memory of Region 13 when serving in that capacity, and every chorus in the region competed. So that was a great memory for her. She makes her home in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and is honored to be a member of both Lake Ontario Region 16 and North Metro Chorus. She has 2 grown daughters, one's an actor and one's a nurse, and welcomed a first grandson into her life in October of this year. And both Katie and I recently have new grandchildren too, so we totally get that excitement. She lives on her own with her cactus named Squishy, which I need to hear more about at one point. But let's give Therese a warm Region 13 welcome to our Together We Can workshop.
Thank you, Shelley. And yes, we can talk about Squishy. Share a presentation with you tonight. It's going to be highly interactive, and if you can put up your electronic hand when I'm asking for conversation, that would be great. If not, Shelley, I would ask you to just keep an eye on the chat if people are wanting to share through the chat. So I'm going to go ahead. Oops. Let me do a new share. Close that and get to my presentation here. There. Give me 1 second. Not doing what I want to do. Close that. Are you seeing that now? My North by Northwest, is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, so I'm honored to be here. As always, I'm doing the keynote address for this, and thank you very much, Shelley. When I looked at the curriculum for this weekend, I thought, wow, this is a really amazing weekend, and so it's a real honor for me to be doing the keynote address for you. And so I'm going to start, as I always do, by thanking you. I always am so grateful to be working with Sweet Adelines. There's no other group of people in the world that are as engaged and as eager learners as we are in Sweet Adelines, and I so appreciate being a part of that process for you. Again, when I looked at at what was being offered this weekend, I thought, especially I love the taking it back to your chorus. And what I thought about, as you take it back to your chorus, what's really going to impact that ability to do that is your chorus culture. So I wanted to talk about chorus culture and how important leadership is when we're dealing with chorus culture. So we're going to talk about 7 factors in shaping chorus culture. We're going to talk about environment, interactions, language, routines, expectations, opportunities, and modeling. And in each of these, I'm going to ask you to do some considerations on your own. If we don't get to all of that interactivity during this session, I'll ask you to consider them as you're going through your courses this weekend, because I think all of this, again, applies to when you take it back, you're taking it back into your chorus culture. So I'm going to start with establishing a group environment. And so the question we ask ourselves is the physical environment a space that supports learning, thinking, and collaboration? And a couple of the things we think about, are there physical barriers? So things, is there proper lighting? Is there a noise factor? Is the temperature comfortable? As we came back from COVID, it was, is the air circulation okay? So this is all about any physical barriers that might be in the way of the learning environment and helping people think and collaborate. And then are there factors that are encouraging and inspiring? So some courses will put up posters, or if they've got goals that they're seeking, they'll put up visual aids to remind people of those goals. So that physical environment can really be supportive in creating a learning space for our members. So this is the question I'm going to ask you in terms of all of the factors that we go through tonight. Is what are the factors that you, in your leadership role, assistant, associate directors, section leaders, visual communication teams, can consider in helping establish a healthy group environment? So I'm just going to stop sharing for just a moment and see if anybody has, if you can unpin me, that would be great. I'll remove, if you don't mind, just so I can see other people. If you have your hand up, any thoughts that you might have about how you, in your role, can help create that chorus environment in your culture that supports your culture. So think about your culture, think about how you would describe your chorus, and what are the physical things you do that support that. So put up your electronic hand if you can. If not, you can put something in the chat. Any thoughts? Do any of you use posters or have your goals up and visible, or inspirational thoughts that you have, or mascots or prizes that you give, that type of thing, in a physical way? Does anybody have any ideas they could share? Sandy.
Yeah, our course, periodically we pass out note cards and we write down things we want to work on, things that personally, personal goals, and we take them out periodically and review them and kind of discuss them a bit. So that's what we do.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's a real tangible way, right, to support those goals. And Katie said, post an agenda on a big board so that we know what to expect every night. We're going to talk about expectations in a little bit as well. That's part of how we can help our courses as well. So any other thoughts? Okay, we'll move on. So the second factor I want to talk about is facilitating group interactions. So group interactions are those things like conversations, how we speak to each other, our body language, how we interact with each other. So in asking yourself as a leader, do your chorus interactions forge relationships that empower learning? So we can ask questions like, do discussions and conversations take place at appropriate times and places? And we've all heard the rule, praise in public, provide constructive feedback in private. So that we are empowering people to learn. And then are there communicated processes to enable members to have their thoughts and concerns heard? So do you have conflict resolution practices in place? Do you have ways for people to submit ideas for maybe a package that's coming up? So just ways that you can enable your members to have their thoughts and concerns heard. Most people, you will hear, one of the biggest requirements is to be heard. Just to be heard. Sometimes it isn't necessary even for something to be resolved, as long as people are feeling they're being heard. So again, I'm going to ask you, what factors that you can consider in facilitating productive group interactions? And again, thinking in your specific role. So if you're a director, assistant director, how could you do this in an assistant director? If you're a visual communication leader, how could you do that in that way? And if you're a section leader, how could you, different things you could do? So again, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and ask people to chime in. Any thoughts? And I can only see one screen here, so.
Christy has her hand raised. Christy, do you want
Christy.
to say something?
Sorry, I'm trying to find all my buttons to click. Um, our course has a culture of being very open and allowing for those conversations to happen. Those can happen. Our members know they can go to their section leader. The director is always available to speak to. We invite our members to attend our music team and our management team meetings so that they have an opportunity to express what it is that they're concerned about or ideas that they have. So we just have a really, and everyone that comes in knows that they have that. We make sure that new members know that they have that avenue of conversation.
That's great. What chorus are you with, Christy?
Alaska Sound Celebration.
And what is your role?
I am a section leader, a co-section leader for the bass section. I'm on the showmanship team. I wear many hats, Therese.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful to have. Again, if there's a process in place, everybody understands that. That's very strong culture that everybody knows that this is how we do this thing. And I would suggest, this is just my own perception, that also means that those conversations are taking place in a way that's respectful. So if I know I can go to my section head, I'm less likely to yell something out from the risers or do something like that. So I think that's a very strong example. Thank you so much for that, Christy. Anybody else?
I think Paula had her hand up.
Paula.
Did you?
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, was trying to write it in the chat. Yeah, we just try to provide every week an opportunity where members have a guided question or something, but it encourages them to talk to one another and respond encouragingly, whether that is, what are the things you're doing really well on body alignment? Is there anything maybe you could improve a little bit? All the way to go to 3 people before you leave tonight, hug them and tell them why you love singing with them. So just to try to encourage members talking to one another before they get out of the room.
Yeah, and one of the things about that, Paula, is it's one of the most significant steps in conflict management, is that everyday conversation, because that's where you establish that people care about each other. So you're not dealing in conflict the first time you speak to each other. You already know that person cares about you. And if they're speaking to you in a conflict situation, you will know that it's still out of a spirit of wanting to support you. And Cheryl said, chorus values provide language for communication, which is excellent. Very good. All right. So moving on to the third. Constructing group language. So we talked a little bit about this in what you were just saying, where your values provide the language. And this one is really important for leaders. Do you appreciate and wield the subtle but profound power of language? So language is extremely powerful. So do you consider carefully how your language might include or exclude members of the chorus? And this, of course, goes along with our corporate value of corporate guiding principle of cultural belonging. And so just that idea of, do you think about it when you're saying things, if it might include, if it's being very inclusive or perhaps being a little bit exclusive? And then, do you use language that puts the brain in a receptive learning space? This is really important because when a brain is put in defensive space, it's very difficult to learn. It goes into its fight or flight, regardless of the fact that you may be safe. The brain, when it's put in a defensive space, it's very difficult to access those executive centers that help you to learn. If you put it in a receptive space, so Paul, I thought your example of saying, what are you doing really well? And then being able to say, and here's something maybe you could work on. But that sandwich that they used to talk about, where say something good, then give the feedback, constructive feedback, is actually, it has base in science because it puts the brain in a learning space to begin with. So, directors who will say, let's strive to get that chord tuned up type thing, rather than stop singing that chord flat. The language makes a difference in putting the brain in a receptive space. So what factors can you consider in constructing group language that best support learning? And again, I'm going to ask you to share some thoughts on this. What can you do in your role? You know, especially those of us who are giving feedback. I think section leaders, you know, we often have to give feedback on, for those of us who have learning qualification, or if there's an issue with the singer, we sometimes have to do that. Allison.
Hi. I sing with Voices Northwest, which is how I'm here. I also sing with Lionsgate. And I actually haven't sung with Voices Northwest very long, so I'm going to use some examples from Lionsgate, where one thing that we do is that we emphasize that we are all learners. So we actually have a sign that says, I am a learner, to remind everyone. And so when we're giving feedback to each other, we have this culture where, of course, you're not going to be perfect the first time you try something or as you're learning something, like, but you're learning. And so so we try to give feedback in um, that style. So it helps it be more or less confrontational and more assisting people to do their best and allowing people to make mistakes and to not have everything exactly perfect all the time. So.
That's beautiful. Yeah, being in that space of a learner, which of course is the goal of everyone in this organization. We're all lifelong learners. So always remembering when you're dealing with someone that they're learning, that's a beautiful way to make sure that we're dealing again with that positive, constructive language. Sally. Oh, you were unmuted. Now you're back on mute.
Now I am again.
There you
Hi.
go.
Hi, I'm with Olympia Chorus. And one thing that I'm not sure we always do it in our chorus, but it's something that I try to be aware of. I think it's helpful. And that is recognizing the teachable moment when sometimes it's better to wait to work on something. It's the person is not in, as you say, a receptive frame of mind. Maybe they're frustrated or upset, and that's not maybe the time to start drilling on something. So just kind of be aware of, are they receptive? And even if it's out of context, but if they've asked a question that it's a good time to do that, that's a good teachable moment, and try to take advantage of those.
That's an excellent point. That takes a lot of awareness on your part to kind of be empathetic and recognize when someone is maybe in a stressful moment or maybe has had enough constructive criticism for the moment and needs some time to absorb. So excellent. Thank you so much, Sally. All right. Moving on. So building group routines, and these routines are those things that are, you know, our traditions and those type of things. So do your routines minimize confusion, reduce uncertainty, and direct activity along known paths? So there's a lot around consistency and routines being applied with equity. So are they established, are they documented, and are they applied with equity? So if you do have things like qualification criteria, is everyone treated the same with that qualification criteria? It's really important that they be applied with equity, because if they are not, then they're ineffective and actually can do more harm than good. So oftentimes when we hear choruses in conflict, this is one of the things we hear, is that somebody else with the same behavior was treated differently. So it's really important as leaders to make sure that routines are established, documented, and applied with equity. And then, do your routines include ways to celebrate as well as ways to learn? So do you have formal procedures and routines, traditions that you do that make sure that you're also celebrating as well as providing the support for learning? Okay. So once again, I'm going to ask you, what are the factors you can consider in building group routines that build confidence and trust in your members? Any thoughts on that one?
I can't find my hand raise button. It seems to have moved.
Someone has their hand raised?
Go
Go ahead and speak up, whoever
Shelley's
that.
raising her hand. Okay,
Who is?
Shelley.
Okay.
I think it's really important to be careful not to star people, like make people stars. And I think that's hard because we have our achievers that step up and they do wonderful things. But sometimes we spend too much time acknowledging individuals instead of the group. So it's something I'm working on, but trying to.
Yeah, it's also important that we recognize that we have talents and other people have different talents. And so we also have to be able to celebrate. Now, I understand what you're saying, because sometimes it's always the same people over and over again. But it's also important, sometimes we forget that the people who have achievements also need that positive reinforcement as well. I find that it's one of the things I learned from Paula is that, our top faculty, those people who are master faculty, they also need to be told by people that they're being highly effective. So it's a really good point to, be careful. You celebrate all kinds of talents, right? So that person who greets everyone so successfully at the door also needs to be separated, as well as a quartet that just won a crown kind of thing. So it's an excellent thing. Have balance in that as well. Christy.
Yeah, I just wanted to share something that our chorus does that I think they do so well. And our membership team, every year we have our annual banquet, and our membership team gives an award to every single member of the chorus. Even if they're not at the banquet, they still create an award. And it's based on what that chorus member has contributed during the year. It doesn't matter what it is, whether, you can always count on that person to give you a smile. Whatever it is, they get an award for something. So every member feels acknowledged and recognized for whatever they're contributing to the chorus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of the catching somebody doing good. When I was president of a fairly small chorus, I used to give just a President's Choice Award every week, and they could be really silly things, like they could be just that. I had one woman who was so positive, and she was really tiny, so I called her my pocket sweet Adeline, because I wished I could carry her everywhere with me. So I love that idea of recognizing the good in people, and it also puts you in a really good frame of mind, because you're looking for the good in people. You're trying to find the good. And, sometimes when we can't see that plainly in people, we do have to go looking, but typically we can find something. So I love that. And it doesn't feel like everybody gets a trophy thing, because it is very specific to each member's contribution. So that, that idea of when you give praise, give it with a direct and concrete message. That's really important. Thank you. Those are both wonderful things. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing. So managing group expectations, we've talked a little bit of this and all the other ones as well. And this one really is about recognizing and managing how the group beliefs shape behavior. So what we believe about ourselves and what we believe about our group, and how that manages expectations. And so we ask ourselves, are your expectations aligned with what you need to achieve group goals? So, for example, song qualification, performance participation, are those expectations aligned with what you're trying to achieve? Because if they're not, they can become meaningless rules, which are almost worse than not having the rule at all. And then, do you have a process for expectations to be adjusted for changes in group goals? So if you think about, some of the things that happened in COVID and the makeup of our choruses, a lot of the makeup of our choruses changed a lot. And so do you have a process in place to say, okay, maybe we do need to look at different goals? So do you have that kind of documented? Do you go into a goal setting that then says, here's what we need to do, here's what we expect from each other to get to that place? So what are the factors that you can consider in building, managing group expectations that move your chorus towards achieving your goals? Any thoughts on those factors? Yes, Paula. Unmute, please.
I'm so sorry.
That's fine.
We may have a little bit of a backdoor experience on this, but sometimes when people have been in our organization for a very long time, they have expectations that everybody does it the same way, or that generally they do it the same way. And because we have very different goals in our chorus, there are things that everybody comes, if they've been a Sweet Adeline, they kind of expect this is the way you do it. And we have to tell them that that expectation is not a part of this chorus. So you have to be clear about that up front, so they aren't feeling like they're trying to meet some expectation and other people are not.
Yeah, and it's such an excellent example, Paula, of how different choruses have different cultures, and that's okay. And that your expectations are about achieving your goals. And that's where those things that you talk about that you don't necessarily have, it's because that's not what you need to achieve your goals. So that's a really great example of how that works. Anybody else?
Krista put
I see
something
one
in
here. Since
the
COVID,
chat.
one of our mantras has been that just because that's how we've always done it, that way doesn't mean we have to. Change is inevitable, and change is good. Change is growth, right? And as lifelong learners, that's again one of our guiding principles is that growth and empowerment of every member. So that's COVID really gave us some lessons to learn. I said it was the greatest leadership development program I've ever seen, because the way that leaders stepped up because they had to was amazing. So yeah, we're in a different mindset now, which is a huge opportunity for us. Speaking of which, crafting group opportunities. So when we think of group opportunities, we think, do you present opportunities for each member to participate at their current level? And I think some of what you've already been talking about. So do you have low risk, high return opportunities for members who need to build their confidence? And I talk a lot about this when I talk about delegating, is when you delegate something to someone, make sure they've got a high chance of success at that thing. Sometimes we assign things to people and they don't succeed, and it makes them look like they're not able to achieve when we've actually either asked too much of them or put them in a position where they don't have the skills to achieve that. So just making sure of that. And then do you provide advanced opportunities for members with proven commitment and skills? So this is where, do you look at moving people into section leadership and things like that, so that they are also continue to be engaged at the level that keeps them learning and moving forward as well. So again, I'll ask the question, what are the factors that you can consider in crafting group opportunities that encourage full engagement and participation by chorus members? So thoughts on this one? Paula.
I'm just going to share that example that I think I told you at International. I was in another region helping them with strategic planning, and they had a brand new member of an RMT that came. And she told me her story as a new member of Sweet Adelines, because she hadn't been a member. She'd only been maybe 5 years as a Sweet Adeline. When she came, after a few months, everybody had some kind of job to do in the chorus. Everybody was doing stuff, and she felt bad. So she asked her section leader, should I be doing something? And I think very often we say, well, just learn your music or whatever. But this very wise section leader said, you know what? I have several jobs that I do around here. And one of them is I'm supposed to always put a pencil on the director's stand. And I forget it half the time. Would you just be in charge of putting the pencil on top of the director's stand? She took that and ran with it. And 5 years later, she was new on the RMT. So I just think that's the most wonderful story, because something as a director, something as small as having a pencil there when you need it is important. So
it is important. And again, it's an opportunity that's very high likelihood of success, and not real high risk of or real high risk, although some directors might disagree with me. But it is a great example of getting someone involved. I remember when I joined Sweet Adelines, and they used to say, oh, your first year, just learn your music. But people who come into the organization who are doers and who love to be a part of that, you know, helping and that type of thing, there's no reason they can't be doing that right away. It makes them feel more a part of the chorus. So something we've learned. Very good. Was there anybody else there? Did I miss anybody? Okay. And the final one is mastering group modeling, perhaps one of the most important ones. And the question we ask ourselves here is, do we seek to see ourselves through our members' eyes and those of our partner leaders? So are we truly modeling the behavior that we want to see in our members? So it's kind of the, you know, do you walk the walk? You talk the talk, do you walk the walk? There's nothing more destructive than a leader who says do one thing and then does another, because it will not reinforce the behaviors that you want in the chorus. In fact, it will reinforce behaviors where, yeah, we have the lip service, but we don't follow through. And then do you strive as a leader to demonstrate all of the elements of your culture, all of those elements we've spoken about tonight, consistently, and make corrections when necessary? So one final question, what are the factors that you consider in mastering group modeling to promote consistent behavior among your members? This is a big one. The modeling is a really important thing for leaders to do. Yes, Sally Ryerson.
Well, one obvious thing would be, as a section leader, it's important that I know the music before we have a sectional, so that I can help my members learn what they need to, and help them however I can. So that's one way I try to model, is to be one of the first to be off the paper and know the music, so I'm able to help someone else.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, Sally, I was in a chorus where that was not the case. One of the section leaders actually kind of bragged about it on the rises. Oh, I don't know my music. And guess what? That was the section that struggled the most to learn their music. So while it may seem obvious to you, it's really important that the people in your section see you've done the work and you have learned the song. They can come to you for help, but that, you know, for them, it's like, okay, this is what's expected in my chorus. Anybody else? Role models.
There's a couple comments in the chat.
Okay. So I have our chorus assigns delegates on our leadership team to help grow future chorus leaders. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's one of the things we struggle with throughout the organization, especially with being a nonprofit, a volunteer organization, is to find those leaders. I know we say on the regional management team, your first job is to find your replacement. So this is really wonderful. And in the car on the way home, I asked myself how the night went and correct my behavior if I sensed something didn't work. That's brilliant, just doing that inventory. And what a great way to kind of, on the way home, when you're by yourself, you have that chance to think, to look at that as well. And to correct the behavior thing is huge. We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. And so that ability, either if someone gives you feedback or if you yourself recognize or say, oh, I wish I'd have said that a different way, to be able to do that as you go forward is really significant. All right. Well, I think I'm at the end of my time. I actually think I've gone over a couple of minutes.
Sorry,
So
can
I'll,
I make a couple of comments just on the correcting behavior thing?
sorry, I didn't.
This is Allison, sorry.
Oh, Allison, sorry, I didn't hear you. Let me turn up my volume a little bit.
Oh, I don't know if that's my mic or anything too. I was going to say that as far as correcting behavior and things and self-evaluation, it also helps if you take feedback to try to be good about taking feedback and not take things
Absolutely.
perfect or personally. And also to be willing to own up to your mistakes and apologize to people if you need to, and not necessarily act like you have everything together 100% of the time, because I think that people like to know that you're human and that you also make mistakes, and people will respect you more if you can admit your mistakes than if you pretend you never make any.
Yeah, and the reality is people know you've made mistakes, and that apology thing, Allison, the authentic apology is huge. To be able to say, I'm sorry, not I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm sorry for the impact I had on you. So not putting it in the other person, but that sincere, authentic apology is one of the most powerful relationship builders there is. So I appreciate you providing that feedback. All right. Well, are there any questions at all before we leave? I don't want to use up too much of your time because I know you've got other things on the go. It looks like such an exciting weekend, and I invite you, as you know, as you go through the classes, think about these things. Think about, there's some wonderful classes. If you're in front of the chorus directing, what are some of the ways you can reinforce the learning? If you're in a section, what are things you can do in your section? If you're giving evaluations, there's giving evaluations in a lot of things. And, with the visual communication category, I think the rewrite or the update of that category was a lot about that, a lot about expressing things in the way we want people to interpret them. So getting the language right is really important. So I just invite you to consider these things as you're going through the weekend, because the difference for each of you is you will be taking it back into your own chorus culture. So if there are no questions, I am going to thank all of you. Again, I'm going to end the way I started, in gratitude. I appreciate so much being a part of this and being able to see you all going into this weekend willing to learn, and the classes look wonderful. I wish I was attending them all, but I'm very happy to have been your keynote speaker. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Therese. And of course, you're welcome to stay if you want, but I know it's also very late for you. So appreciate you coming, and what a great message. Thank you so much. Okay. So
thanks.
we are,
good night all.
Yeah, thank you. We are a few minutes behind, but I think we can make it up throughout the rest of the evening. So not worried at all. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to kick